know, and I just love that whole idea of all of us coming together, different races, just, we're all at different ages and places in life. And, I hope even some of our friends could come, even from different churches, that we could just all come together and sit at the feet of Jesus. And so that's kind of like my idea that I have when when this kept coming up in my prayer time. It's like I was on my prayer runs, it's like the circle. And I just had this vision. And so I really, really hope the next 6 weeks.
Sorry, Laurie. Denise is trying to get in. So can you let her in?
Um, Danny's managing that. So I'll
Oh,
have,
okay.
yeah.
Uh,
So anyway, so I had this whole idea of coming together and also just, to be with each other, because I know I miss not being together. And I know many of you have voiced the very same thing. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to come together and hopefully have quiet times on Saturday morning. And so come together for a quiet time, and that'll be great. So, the passage that I'm going to focus on today is in Matthew chapter 8. So, if you could turn over there to Matthew chapter 8, because what we're going to do is we're really going to focus in on Jesus's interactions with two different individuals. They were both for men, and they were from their lot in life was very different, let's just say. We're going to look at someone who was a leper, and then we're going to look at someone who was a centurion, who was a leader. Okay. So let's look in Matthew chapter 8. It says, when he came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said, be clean. Immediately he was cured of his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, see that you don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priests and offer the gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them. When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. Lord, he said, my servant lies at home paralyzed and in terrible suffering. Jesus said to him, I will go and heal him. The centurion replied, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard this, he was astonished and said to those following him, I tell you the truth, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom of heaven, or the king, will be thrown outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then Jesus said to the centurion, go, it will be done just as you believed it would. And his servant was healed at that very hour. So these are like amazing stories here. And I want to focus on a few specific things here. You think about the man with leprosy. Okay, here's a man who has a terrible disease. For those of you that don't know what leprosy is, it's a terrible disease. It's actually caused by a bacteria that affects the nerves. Your nerves get damaged. And so your hands, your feet, you don't feel any pain. And so you're constantly hurting yourself, not knowing it. You get wounds. And literally your body starts like falling apart pretty much. Most people lose their arms and their legs. And it's a terrible, terrible thing. It looks terrible. It's scary. And the lepers were shunned. They were the outcasts. They were like, get away. You know, they lived in colonies. It's like, and everybody would run from the lepers. It's like, oh, gross. You know, and even spiritually, they were considered unclean. And so this is a terrible thing to have if you have leprosy. And they thought back then this is highly contagious. And so, you know, run, run, run. And so leprosy was just a very lonely, very painful disease to have. And so I think about this leprosy, or this man with leprosy, how it says in verse 2, a man with leprosy came and knelt before him. So first of all, you know, he came after Jesus. He wanted healing. He was desperate. And then he says he knelt before him. And I think, you know, it just shows humility. And in both of these situations with both these guys, we're going to look at, there's three common characteristics that they had. And the first one is humility. You know, he came and knelt before Jesus. You know, I think about just many scriptures in the Bible that talk about humility and even humbling yourself as much as to kneel before Jesus. You know, James 4:10 says, humble yourselves before the Lord and he will lift you up. You know, Paul, Ephesians 3:14, he says, for this very reason, I kneel before my Father in heaven, or for the Father in heaven. Nehemiah 9 verse 6, it says, all the heavenly host bow to you. I mean, wow. You know, you think about that. All the heavenly host bow down. You know, how often do we, self-included, you know, get down on my hands and knees or just bow before the Lord? You know, I think if we really feel God's presence and power and awe, I mean, how can we not bow, you know, at times, you know, before the Lord? And I know even preparing for this lesson, or getting ready this morning, you know, Mike told me, I'm not going to be here. Actually, I have a breakfast appointment. I'm like, what? You know, computer technology, and Lori, this could be a problem. And so I started to get anxious. And then I listened to Elevation Worship. That's one of my favorite worship teams. If you want a really good vertical worship, I listen to Elevation Worship Pandora, because it's very much, you know, vertical worship, meaning talking to God. And there was a song that just says, you know, I exalt thee. And so I just literally paused and just turned away from the mirror and just had some time in worship. I'm like, this is what it's all about. It's about Jesus and just worshiping him. And that was actually really, really good for me, just to have that moment. But he wants us to worship and bow and be humble. He recognizes that. And so I think it's a good question. You know, am I humble before the Lord? Do I bow before him, you know, in worship and in humility? Secondly, I love how this man, this leper, called Jesus Lord. You know, Lord means the one in charge, the one in authority, the one who has influence, the master. I loved how he called him Lord. And so he called him Lord. He humbled himself. But then also I like where he says, if you are willing, you can make me clean. You know, and I've read that for years, and I kind of always focused on the if you are willing part. You know, if you are willing, you can make me clean. But then I read it differently. I said, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And it kind of changed the whole feel of it. Like, if you're willing, you can make me clean, meaning there's a basic faith there. There's a basic faith, like, I know you can make me clean. You're the Lord, and you can make me clean. And so it's that humility, it's that lordship, it's that basic faith, those three things that I love that this leper really modeled for us, basically. Well, how did Jesus respond to him? So he says, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. And then It says in verse 3, Jesus reached out his hand and he touched the man. You know, you think about this. Jesus had a lot of people coming at him at this point, right? Because it says large crowds. He just had the Sermon on the Mount, comes down from the mountainside, and there's large crowds of people. So I'm sure there were people yelling at him, you know, Rabbi, Master, Lord, you know, heal me. I'm sure people were all up in his face, right? But yet he took time and he focused solely on this guy. I love this moment. And I think sometimes we can just read through this and miss the special, intimate moments that Jesus had with people. It says he reached out his hand and he touched the man. It's like, what? He touched the leper? Oh my gosh, people were probably freaking out. Like, he just touched this guy. He's unclean. You know, I'm sure people, especially the religious people, were like, what is he doing here? But he says he reached out and he touched the man. You know, Jesus didn't have to touch the man. You know, he could have just said, you know, you're healed, because he's done that often, you know, go and sin no more. He just, you know, he just heals people with his words. But I think it just shows relationally how Jesus loves deeply and he knows what we need. He touched this man because this man hasn't been touched in years, you know, and human touch is essential for man, for women, for all of us. And that's how we were created, you know, from the very beginning. You know, if babies aren't touched and cuddled, you know, they're deficient. And so I think this man, you know, for years has not been touched. And the fact that Jesus touched him, it met a need. Jesus didn't just heal the leprosy. I believe he healed his soul. He healed his heart. And I think that just shows how Jesus loves us, you know, so specifically, and knows exactly what we need. That's why I think Jesus says, come to me and I will give you peace. You know, he knows what we're feeling on the inside. We may look like we have it all together on the outside, but he knows our thoughts. He knows, you know, what's going on in the deep places in our hearts. And I think as we go into the new year, really think about, you know, where are you, you know, emotionally? Where are you spiritually? Where are you physically? Because Jesus wants to touch us. He wants to heal us, not just outwardly, but he wants to heal us from deep, deep within. And if you haven't listened to Deb's message, you know, that Debbie Apple, she did our midweek on the intimacy with Jesus lesson. I really, really encourage you to go back and listen to it again, because she talks a lot about this, that whole intimate connection that Jesus wants with us. And if we don't get that as disciples, you know, we're deficient. We're missing out on some things, because it becomes more about rules and regulations, do's and don'ts, and oh, I got to get up and go to church. You know, and the heart of it is missing. And I think really listen to her. I listened to her lesson like 3 times and actually taught it twice. And it's just been so good for me to know what those 4 pillars are in our relationship with him. And I think if you don't know what they are, I think go back and watch it over again, because it's so good for the soul. So that's why Jesus touched the man, not just to heal him, but to really connect with him. Secondly, we're going to look at the centurion, okay? So the centurion, you know, a centurion is this professional officer in the Roman army. So what would that look like in a person? Okay, this guy obviously had a lot going on, or a lot together, right? He was probably a very strong person, very respected, very commanding, because he was put in charge of other people. So this guy had a lot going on, right? And probably very strict, very disciplined. I'm just trying, like an A-type personality. That's how I would probably guess he would be. But what do you notice about the centurion? It says, when Jesus had entered Capernaum, the centurion came to him asking for help. And then he says, Lord. So again, here's someone who's very strong, realized he had a great need. And so he went looking for, asking for help. And he says, Lord. So again, here's another person, and this guy's a Roman calling Jesus Lord, meaning you're in charge, you have the authority, you have the power. Even though I'm a man of power, I believe you have more power. And then what I noticed about this guy also is that he cared about his servant. He wasn't just this hard-hearted guy, because I think the way he described his servant, he says, my servant is home paralyzed in terrible suffering. And so he cared. He cared about his servant and wanted to get him help. So I think that says a lot about this centurion. And then, so he says, Jesus says to him, I will go and heal him. So Jesus like, man, I'm on this. You came to me. Yes, I have the authority and the power, and I will go and heal him. But I love the centurion's remark, which is humility. He says, I don't deserve you to come into my house. It's like, oh, no. I don't even waste your time coming into my house. Don't want you to waste your time coming into my house, because you are amazing. You are Lord. I don't even deserve that. He says, just say the word. If you just say the word, my servant is going to be healed. And so I see again humility, just like the leper bowing down in humility. The centurion takes that, that humble state before Jesus. I don't even deserve that. So humility, right? And then they both called him Lord. So it's that humility, lordship, and then just that basic faith. Like the leper says, if you're willing, you can make me clean, right? And here you go with the centurion, just say the word and he's going to be healed. It's just that basic faith. And I think so often, we can miss that and overcomplicate things with Jesus. It's like sometimes I think we think too much. Just, oh, okay, I'm going to pray about this, but if this happens, then this is going to have to take place. And sometimes we get so overthink things that if we just had that childlike heart and just believe and ask, okay, I know Jesus is going to do this. I don't know how this is all going to play out. I don't have to figure that out, because Jesus is going to do that for me. But it's just that basic faith. There's so many scriptures where it's like, if you just believe, I think John 15, if we remain in him and him in us, ask whatever you wish and it will be given to you. Do we believe these scriptures? When we're praying for our family, our friends, or we're trying to overcome an area, it's like, I want to change in this area. I think so often we go into a new year and we think about what we want to change or become. And then we start thinking about all the things that we got to do. It's like, okay, I got to do this, I got to do that, and it gets overwhelming. And so it's like, oh, it's just too much. It's because we don't have a basic faith. I think going into the new year, if you want to be healthier, or you just want to be more committed in your heart, ask for that. Your children, you want your children to become disciples. Okay, I got to be this, I got to be that, la, la, la. Ask for that. God can do way more than we can do. And he wants to do that. He wants to bless us. I think going into the new year, I'm just asking God, help me to be what you want me to be. Help me to change these areas that I want to change in the new year. Don't overthink it. I'm a thinker too. So, I'm not just saying y'all thinking too much. I definitely am a thinker. I'm a check off list do person. I can be that same way in my faith. And I love both of these men. they just had the humility to know their limitations and to know who they were and who Jesus was. I was like, oh my gosh, he has so much power. He could do miracles here. So they had that basic faith. They had that humility and that lordship. And I think so often we go into the new year, it's like, I want that peace and I want that joy. I want that life and peace that Romans talks about, right? But it says those who live according to the spiritual nature will have life and peace. And so I think sometimes we want to go into the new year, we want to have all these things, but we don't go to the source, which is Jesus. And so I think that's, a main message that we want to have as we go into the new year, that if you're feeling spiritual flabby, focus on Jesus, your intimacy with Jesus. Relationally, how am I doing with Jesus? Because that's what it's all about. If we just focus on, okay, I got to have my quiet times, I got to have my half-hour Bible study, half-hour prayer, or whatever you do, hour of Bible study. Sometimes we can go into it, look at the spiritual disciplines as just spiritual disciplines, that, prayer and reading and, I think commitment to the body, which all of those are 100% important. But if we don't focus on them from a relational view, they become duties. And so I love the whole idea of Deb's message. And so I really encourage you to go back. And for those that haven't watched it, please, please watch it, because there's a lot of golden nuggets in that message that really, really help us as we navigate our relationship with Christ. And that's what this is all about. And that's why I really want to spend the next 6 weeks focusing on Jesus, learning more about Jesus, being reminded how awesome Jesus is, rekindling that fire, that flame. When we first studied the Bible, I mean, we were willing to meet together, several times a week, some of us. And so, rekindling the fire, but then also pursuing that intimacy. I want to go deeper. I want to go deeper in my intimacy. I want that Psalm 63. And I think if we focus on that, that's going to help motivate us. And so change any thoughts of, okay, I just got to get my spiritual discipline strong, which we do. But change it. I want to know Jesus on a much deeper level this year. I want to connect with Jesus emotionally like I've never experienced before. And so to sum this up, basically both men were modeled for us: humility, lordship, and a basic faith. And hopefully you got that, because I tried to repeat that several times, throughout this lesson. So hopefully you kind of picked that up. And so I think it's really good for us: humility, lordship, and just having a basic faith. Don't overthink, don't overcomplicate things. And so that's my lesson for this morning. I am going to say a prayer. And then what we're going to do is we're going to break out